Good evening and welcome to Thursdays with NAMI. My name is Peg Morrison. I'll be your host for tonight. I am the Assistant Director of NAMI North Carolina. That's the National Alliance on Mental Illness North Carolina. I'm so glad y'all are here. Thursdays with NAMI is our way of building conversations and connections and community on the topic of mental health. One of our goals with Thursdays with NAMI is to highlight powerful voices and perspectives, the advocates that are out there making a real difference in people's lives on the front lines. That's why I'm so excited about tonight's guest. Definitely a NAMI person. She's a family member and has years of experience as a licensed counselor and clinical supervisor. Dr. LaCleisha Izzard, affectionately known as Dr. Izzy, is a leader in the field. She brought telemental health services to patients well ahead of the curve nationally. Today, she is a board member for NAMI Georgia, where she's a founding member of the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Committee. Dr. Izzy is very focused and an inspiring individual. We'll be hearing her words of wisdom in just a few minutes. As usual, the first part of our show will be an interview with our guest. Then we'll spend time with a video of the week, and we'll take questions from you, members of our virtual studio audience and Facebook friends. First, a word from our sponsors. Funding for Thursdays with NAMI comes in part from the North Carolina Department of Health and Human Services, Division of Mental Health, Developmental Disabilities, and Substance Abuse Services, through the Federal Community Mental Health Block Grant Fund. We are truly grateful for their guidance and their supports. All right, without any further ado, let's jump into our conversation with Dr. Izzy. We're lucky to have an evening to spend with her. So we always like to know the background of our guests, what brought you here tonight, what brought you in line with mental health as a life goal. So tell us about yourself in a nutshell.
Ooh, let's see if I can do that, Peg, in a nutshell.
It's always the hardest question.
Yes, happy to be here, you all. I'm so excited to be here this evening with NAMI North Carolina. Absolutely, I fell in love, let me start with that first, with NAMI just a few years ago, actually. So I had the opportunity to be in a position in counselor leadership and had the opportunity to connect with NAMI Georgia with so many different opportunities as it relates to events. And that's how I got connected with NAMI Georgia. And so that was my background in starting with them. But if we date back a little bit further and looking at my background with mental health, that would start when I was actually a very young adult. And that started when I was a special education teacher, actually for Ferndale Middle School in High Point, North Carolina, in which is Guilford County, we know. And so my passion for mental health started there. And so I saw so many young people that were diagnosed with very severe mental health challenges, such as bipolar, such as post-traumatic stress disorder, and just so many more. And so that fostered in me to learn more about mental health. And that's why I eventually moved on into getting my master's in mental health counseling, and then absolutely the family piece. So I do have loved ones that have some mental health challenges, some who are very much so aware of what's going on with them, and others who may not be. And so all of that, I think, helped to shape that fostering in me as related to connecting to mental health and mental wellness. And then once I got in the field, of course, I really just took off from there because I saw the benefits of, number one, being a licensed professional counselor and how I'm able to go in and help individuals on their journey of healing. And so that's how that journey started for me as it relates to mental health. And looking at where I am still today as a community leader in service, that still dates back to when I was very young and watching my grandmothers who were absolutely active in the communities of Greensboro and Gifford County as it related to serving their community, whether it was the homeless, individuals who were in need of food, whether it was individuals who were in need of child care and assistance, individuals who may have had substance use challenges. My grandmothers were there to meet so many different needs. And so I like to tell people that servant leadership is literally a part of my genetics. It's a part of my genetic makeup. And then my mother, she's been a nurse in Greensboro for more than 25 years. So again, servanthood is just literally in me, and it brings me joy. And so that's just a little bit about me in a nutshell, and where I am and how I came to NAMI and how mental health ended up being a part of my life that I love just so very much and have been blessed to know that it's also my gift.
That's a wonderful connection for you to have. I just sort of have this image of your grandmothers helping the community and your mother in nursing, and you're sort of pushing out into an area that's so misunderstood, where education is needed the most. So that's really exciting. I'm so glad to hear that. What changes have you seen in mental health care during your career?
Yes, and again, like I said, I started out in the mental health field when I was a very young adult. So there have been multiple changes that I have seen. I started out working in primarily substance use, but that quickly what I saw change into individuals that didn't just have a primary substance use disorder, but then they also had a mental health disorder. And so what we call that in the clinical field is co-occurring. They used to call it dual diagnosis, but now it's called co-occurring. And sometimes we'll even refer to it as complex, because there's some things in that that may have complex trauma and different things of that nature. But that was one of the first changes that I started to see pretty quickly as I started out as a very young mental health professional. And as time has grown, we've seen how our society has changed. We've seen different things as it relates to the trauma that is happening with our young people and what they are experiencing right now. Our stats for our young people are very, very high as it relates to suicide. So suicide is the second leading cause of death for the age groups of 10 to even up to 34 now. That's new data. And so again, we're just seeing multiple mental health curves and changes as our society changes. And then also with the pandemic, we're seeing even more individuals now with depression and anxiety. Again, that kind of goes back to that co-occurring piece, where there used to be a time where we saw just a primary mental health disorder. Now we're seeing multiple mental health disorders and mental health challenges and conditions with individuals who are coming in. So that would be one of the largest changes and one of the drastic changes that I've seen as it relates to how mental health has changed over time in what we're seeing. And so that opens our eyes to also realizing what we're actually seeing in our world, what we're actually seeing in our society, and how it's affecting individuals as it relates to their mental health and their emotional health. And then that takes us back to, are we talking about it enough? And then again, in what environments are we talking about the mental health challenges? Is it in those environments where we're seeing the mental health challenges who have the greatest numbers, the greatest rates? So again, many times that is in our communities of color and in communities where we see that the socioeconomic status is very low. So again, that's something that, like I said, I've seen just across the board that we're continuing to see, even especially now with us being in the heart of this global pandemic.
That youth suicide rate is very striking, and for young persons of color, Black folks in particular, in that age group, it's been increasing very fast. Even while the overall rate has gone down, I don't know what to make of that. I sure hope we can fix that.
Yes, and absolutely, Peg. I do understand that whenever I do trainings around it, I usually get that response as well. It's like, wow, didn't really realize that. And so that's something that we are doing more research in. I know NAMI is, I know it's been done even at the governmental levels. There was actually a task force that was put into place by the Congressional Black Caucus so that they could do more data around it as it relates to young Black youth, as it relates to young youth of color who fall and identify in the LGBTQ community. And
Right.
so it's just a lot, again, that we're trying to play catch up, as it relates to getting the research. But again, with the pandemic, we're seeing those numbers continue to go high. So it's multiple factors that are absolutely addressing this population, as well as the racial trauma piece that comes with being a young person of color, especially African American descent. So again, there's multiple risk factors that are there that we believe are contributing to that, even though we know that there's no one cause as it relates to when we see suicide rates like that in young people. But we do know that early intervention is something that is critical and that is necessary. And that is something even that NAMI Georgia, as we're gearing up and preparing for our mental health day at the Capitol in a few more weeks, that's
Right.
one of our priorities, is focusing on looking at the behavioral health system as it relates to children and their behavior health. And that's one of our solutions, is early intervention. And even if you go on the CDC website, it speaks about adverse childhood experiences, which we know as ACEs. Okay. So we know, again, if early intervention is not there, then that's going to follow that young person well into young adulthood. And then we're going to see even more severe mental health challenges in their young adulthood and even shorter lifespan. So all of that is a connection, I believe, to seeing these suicide rates the way that they are with our young people. And then again, the changes in the school systems and everything that we're seeing too with the pandemic, and also trauma that we've seen, whether it's shootings and different things like that happening within our school system that our young people are seeing. And then the academic piece. Our young people have been under more academic pressure as it relates to being able to perform, even being able to catch up. We know that we love North Carolina's beautiful opportunities that they have for their young people for early college. I have some of my loved ones who had the opportunity to get accepted into early college in Gifford County. But again, more added academic pressure to them. And so I definitely saw signs and symptoms of anxiety and depression with them. And the pandemic only escalated that, especially when they didn't get a graduation that they thought they were going to get, or they could not celebrate their birthday. So again, all of these things, I think, compounded why we're seeing some of the rates that we're seeing with our young people as it relates to mental health conditions.
Right. And it seems like a good time to mention with NAMI North Carolina, we have virtual support groups that target adults, but the LGBTQ community. And there is for African Americans, a stress and anxiety group. Both of those are virtual. They're listed on our website. And they're very strong. They have, you can have those candid conversations about the different types of oppression, the different intersections that you might face. So we're really excited about those too. We just started both of those last year.
Yay, that's wonderful. Y'all are doing great work, Peg. Congratulations on that.
Thank you so much for that. It lifts all of us up, I think, to do that. And so you've been in telemental health services for a while. How do you help someone get comfortable with a virtual appointment if that's not their starting points?
Absolutely, Peg. So I've been doing telemental health services, or providing telemental health counseling and other services related to the virtual component for a little over 7 years now. And I've absolutely enjoyed every bit of it. And so on a personal note, though, I've enjoyed it because it allows me to have flexibility of time as a working professional. So I'm able to plan my time the way that I need to so that I can still take care of me, so that I can have that self-care component, which is so important for us as mental health professionals. But the other piece about it is it does provide convenience. So for anybody that would be in a situation where they wasn't really sure about if they wanted to try it, I would absolutely say give it a chance so that you can first see the convenience level of it. If you are in a metropolitan area like me in the great state of Georgia near Atlanta with the commuting challenges that we have, that can absolutely be a benefit to you because you don't have to rush out to necessarily get to a brick and mortar location. So that's one. The other piece about it is for some individuals who may have a traumatic background, such as PTSD and some other complex trauma, coming out of the house is not an option for some of them. It may take time for them to work up to that. And so having the telehealth services is definitely an option. Also, the rural aspect. So we know that North Carolina and Georgia is kind of made up in the same way. I heard you all's great president call it like a 3-tier or 4-tier state where we have mountains, we have the coast, we have our metropolitan areas, we have our mountain areas, all of those things as well. But again, our rural areas, many times it's difficult for us to have certain resources in those areas. So again, telehealth makes that a little bit easier to provide some services in those areas, of course, as long as they have good broadband internet, which is also something we're looking at too at the policy levels and all of that, ensuring that all of our communities have access to broadband internet, because again, we understand that telehealth can definitely assist some of those individuals in the rural areas. So for all of those reasons, I think telehealth is absolutely a great tool that we have now in our healthcare system. Since the pandemic, it's been even better because individuals still had to receive services some type of way, whether it's mental health, whether it was physical, or so all of that I think has been a benefit for us as it relates to the telehealth piece. And just understanding again that now we're moving into this new virtual world. And so because we're moving into this new virtual world, being able to embrace some of these services, I think it's just wonderful. So I've seen telehealth grow really, really quickly since the pandemic. And so I'm just glad that there were agencies that already had the infrastructure. And then for certain other agencies that didn't, they definitely got on the ball to make sure that they were equipped to provide the services that they needed to the individuals that need.
Right, absolutely. And we found that too with our support groups, our classes online, that we're reaching people we couldn't get before. And I'm so glad the infrastructure bill that they passed not quite a year ago is going to help those mountainous areas, those rural areas that don't have great broadband, where the internet connections can be sketchy. That's going to get a lot better. So we're all looking forward to that. Speaking of, yeah, you mentioned self-care for the caregivers and for professionals in mental health. And you lead a group for counselors out of NAMI, Georgia. It's online and available to anyone who meets the criteria, of course. What have you learned from that group? How are folks holding up with COVID-19 and all the challenges in mental health care?
Well, thank you for asking that question, Peg.
How are you?
Counselors, the virtual counselor support group, yes, that is really like a baby to me, you all, because literally it was birthed out of me. And, I'll go back a little bit. So I started the counselor support group actually during my time as a counselor leader with the American Counseling Association of Georgia. So actually at the time we did a collab between NAMI Georgia as well as ACA of Georgia. And so even as I ended my term and I continued all of my service work with NAMI Georgia absolutely wanted to see that continue, especially with the pandemic, with where we were going at the time. And so we continued the group. We continued the group for about another year and a half. So I was the primary leader of that group. Individuals that were there were primarily licensed professional counselors, doctorate level, associate level, just, different individual, male and female, and diversity we had within that group. And so I've since, built upon that in bringing about the group for 2022. And so we have a larger group for this one. And we do have some counselors from North Carolina, some counselors from Florida, and absolutely counselors in the state of Georgia. But what I've really found and learned and noticed about doing this particular group is that number one, helping professionals need support too. We are essential workers too. And one of the challenges many times that we have as helping professionals is putting ourselves first, being able to prioritize our own self-care. It's a challenge because when you have a big heart to serve and a big heart to help heal, that's what usually your primary focus is. But what we have to remember is that if we don't take care of ourselves, if we don't do the work that we need to do, how can we be effective to help others? And so that support group provides them with that encouragement. It provides them with that confidence. It provides them with that support to let them know that it's okay to take care of you. We also provide different resources because we bounce ideas off of one another. So we're able to brainstorm about different ways that we can better help and serve our clients and the individuals who are in need. So again, that counselor support group has just been absolutely amazing in seeing our helping professionals thrive. So, we love to say that in the NAMI world as it relates to our peers, we want to see them be able to thrive, but we also want to see our helping professionals thrive. And the reason why I say that, you all, is because helping professionals are at high risk for compassion fatigue, secondary traumatic stress, vicarious trauma, and so much more, even burnout. And so those are some areas absolutely I recommend that you Google so that you can learn a little bit more about them. But compassion fatigue just as a whole is something that I've been able to see during my course as a mental health professional and working in community-based mental health. I saw a lot of my peers experience compassion fatigue, meaning they got to a point to where that sensitivity, that humility toward the population that they were serving was no longer there. And that is because they were not actively taking care of themselves so that they could be built back up again and rejuvenated and all of these good things so that they could think clearly and be balanced in their thinking. So again, it's just so many different things that we can be at risk for as a helping professional if we don't take care of ourselves. So again, the virtual counselor support group also helps to remind the helping professionals in the group that we're at risk for these things. So if you don't take care of you, 9 times out of 10, you're going to experience one of these at some point. And what we don't want to happen, Peg, is we don't want to lose our helping professionals. We don't want to lose our mental health care workers because, again, they're essential. We need them. And so absolutely, we want to teach them how to better take care of themselves so we can keep them in the field.
Absolutely. Yeah, just like with first responders, you get that very intense exposure to other people's pain and trauma, especially in such an anxiety-inducing era like the pandemic and the social unrest and the racial trauma. So it is a lot. And so,
Yeah, I was
yeah.
just going to say, and we work with the first responders again. So, a part of my background is working with the military population, and even serving inmates within the medical prison system in Georgia. So again, I have definitely worked with populations with severe trauma. And so for me, that was something that I really had to get a hold of. Okay, still as a young counselor, I had to get a hold of what that meant for me as it related to self-care. And I had to become intentional about it. That's something that I teach them in the counselor support group. We have to be intentional, meaning we have to schedule it in. We have to literally schedule it in every day. It's not just 2 or 3 vacations a year. You have to schedule your self-care in every day because we're helping people every day.
I support that. You sure can't pour from an empty cup. So I'm so glad you're out there for people. And so we've talked a little bit about diversity, equity, inclusion, and I think it is getting more attention in the media, more attention in our culture. Has that translated into more culturally competent or humble mental health care?
I understand exactly what you're saying about that. And first, I'll say, Peg, it's still a work in progress. Absolutely. DEI, I think NAMI now has adapted JEDI, which, just includes justice. So justice, diversity, equity, and inclusion. So understanding that we are in a movement as it relates to those particular areas. We know that in 2020, the murder of Mr. George Floyd, as well as Ahmaud Arbery in Georgia, as well as Breonna Taylor, those were some of the highlighted, situations that we saw that literally sparked this DEI movement like we've never seen it before. We know that individuals were active in diversity and inclusion work before, but absolutely not to this degree and not to this level because of what we saw in the summer and the spring of 2020. And so we're still moving forward. We're still pressing forward and working toward that. I do think individuals are becoming, or should I say professionals are becoming more aware that culturally competent treatment is needed. I still think education has to be done around it. Again, my background as a licensed professional counselor, so I'm very familiar with being a multiculturally competent counselor. So that's looking at my knowledge base, my attitudes, my beliefs, and how I see the world, my worldview, how I see things through my eyes. But the other piece of that, again, like you said, is the cultural competence piece, or what we like to say now, cultural humility. And so when I say those two terms, I like for individuals to really get a good grip of understanding about it. And I think it's more about being intentional when it comes to learning about different cultures and what they have experienced. And especially if you're a helping professional, how you can integrate what you've learned about their culture into their treatment. Okay, that's number one. So if we really want to see people thrive and recover and get better, we absolutely have to be culturally humble and we have to be culturally competent by being intentional about learning about that particular client's cultural background and how they've been affected. How has mental health been a part of their life? Why is it a part of their life? Whether they have a good mental health, whether they have a few challenges, let's take a look at that. So meaning you want to look at strengths, you want to look at weaknesses, you want to look at all of these different areas to give yourself a well-rounded knowledge base so that you can be the best helping professional or the best support staff or individual for this particular culture group. So what we're seeing more with the DEI, and I've been really blessed again to be a founding member of NAMI Georgia's Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Committee. So I had the opportunity to develop and to lead our first event series, which was titled Courageous Conversations about Diversity and Mental Health amid COVID. Absolutely. And so my leadership in that, Peg, is what I saw is that we needed to bring out some of these hot topics and we needed to be honest and we needed to share at our comfort level to the very best of our ability so that we can then start educating our community. And so the way that it was set up in panel discussion. So I moderated each event last year, and we think we had at least 5 to 6 panelists for each series. And we ended up collaborating, I know, with probably over 30 community stakeholders across the state of Georgia. So I think, again, we did an amazing job getting that knowledge, that information out there, pulling people together. I love collaboration, collaborate, collaborate, collaborate. And so being able to share about these hot topics from their professional view, as well as from their personal view. And so those were the things that I made sure to shape those questions around. And I'm so grateful to my committee as well for supporting me and for backing me and being there, as a part of us going through that process together. Because again, it hadn't been done before, Peg. So it was the first time. So literally we did step out. It was a faith walk for us, but it was a victorious faith walk. And so we will continue the Courageous Conversation series this year in 2022. We've really been blessed to have a care fund source from Johnson & Johnson. So yes, they partnered with us where they're going to market a few of our Courageous Conversations events for this year. So we're really excited about that with NAMI Georgia. And we're just excited that other people, took a hold. They took a hold to my vision. They took a hold to what we were doing and the information that we put out there. So again, like I said, I'm just truly humbled, truly honored, and truly grateful that I had the opportunity to lead something like that was so historic and that has been able to continue to press forward and move on. Because again, we know we're still in that movement. And like I said, it's a work in progress. So it's nothing that's going to be done overnight. The work continues, but as long as we're making the effort and we're collaborating together as organizations and community stakeholders and professionals, I think we'll continue to push the needle forward.
Absolutely. It's always so exciting. I get so jazzed about hearing about a wonderful grant like that. Good for y'all. That's great. So I think you're doing wonderful things to get those perspectives highlighted and that name, Courageous Conversations, that's so apt and inspiring. One thing I think of with cultural competence or humility is just the capacity and the lack of mental health professionals in general, much less the BIPOC professionals, the Black, Indigenous, and persons of color. We want our mental health professional community to look like America. And we hear about people waiting weeks or months to get a clinician. And if you want that BIPOC clinician, it can take even longer. What would it take to attract more folks of color to the mental health field?
Absolutely. I understand exactly what you're saying. And yeah, it's a national shortage, Peg. That we're experiencing across the board. And we know it's not just counselors, it's psychiatrists of color, psychologists of color, social workers, it's just across the board as it relates to our different helping professions. But what I can say and what I've noticed from my view and from my experience is that number one, more mental health awareness, number one. And we know how to do that well at NAMI, absolutely. But again, in some cases, NAMI is still a best kept secret. There's individuals I've come in contact with, they have never heard of NAMI. And I mean, they've been professionals sometimes, they're individuals who need our services. But again, some individuals have not heard of the great and amazing work that NAMI is doing. So again, mental health awareness, and what that means is as much as possible at every level. And that happens many times with the collaboration piece. So just like as we were talking about the DEI, the Courageous Conversations we did, many of those community stakeholders, that was their first time interacting with NAMI. That was their first time. But as soon as they interacted with NAMI, then of course we had a partner. And so they've been calling on us ever since. And so I think number one is mental health awareness, getting out there, collaborating, doing as many mental health trainings as we can in communities of color. And so what I've been doing at my level as a servant leader is providing mental health trainings for nonprofit organizations, especially smaller nonprofit organizations in communities of color. We have some that are kind of scaling up, that are getting a little bit more attention now, such as Shanti Das, Silence the Shame. She does great work in mental health awareness in communities of color. I had the beautiful opportunity and experience of recently working with her by doing a panel with Mrs. Keisha Knight Pulliam. For those of you who do not know her, that was the beautiful young lady that played Rudy on The Cosby Show. And she's definitely a native of Atlanta. But we joined together and we did a fireside chat at Clark Atlanta. And it was in collaboration with NAMI National, as well as Silence the Shame, so that we could talk about mental health and mental health awareness to our young people of color, of African American descent. And so again, it takes coming together like that, collaborating and doing many of these type of events so that we can educate our communities more about mental health. So it starts there, and helping individuals to want to come into the field of counseling. And so, yes, we need to be on the college campuses talking about mental health and mental health awareness. We know that we have NAMI on campus. So I'm excited about the work that NAMI North Carolina is doing, and absolutely collaborating and connecting with some of the HBCUs in North Carolina. I am a proud alumni of the largest HBCU in the nation, which is North Carolina Agricultural and Technical State University. And I am also an alumni of Fayetteville State University out of Fayetteville, North Carolina. So I love our HBCUs. I love being able to collaborate. I do go back to A&T a lot and speak to our students of color, our counseling students of color. And so it takes individuals like me with platforms that I have, being able to go back and letting them see what I'm doing to even get them even more interested. And what I've enjoyed recently is SAMHSA has funded a grant for a program called the Interdisciplinary Minority Fellowship Program. And it was developed by the American Psychological Association and the National Board of Certified Counselors, which is actually right there in Greensboro. Big ups to NBCC. But they formed this particular fellowship so that they can pull in more graduate students and doctorate level students of color that want to go into, of course, the mental health and substance use fields. And what they did is they partnered them with a mentor. So I have been a mentor in that new program. So again, thank you so much, SAMHSA, for what they're doing and trying to maneuver through this shortage that we're seeing as well. So I think just doing more things like that, offering more mental health trainings in communities of color, collaborating and doing events on HBCU campuses, as well as being a part of some of these great grant-funded programs that reach out to our students of color.
Wow, that is exciting. That's really an even better, more encouraging answer than I expected. So we've covered some ground with diversity, equity. What else do we need to know?
Again, that's a loaded one. But I just see I have a colleague that shared something in the chat that is very, very important as it relates to advocacy. So that's something that I think we're working on too at the leadership level with NAMI Georgia, is the advocacy piece in our communities of color. And so that's something now, Peg, that I've become very intentional about just as 2020 has come in. Like I told you, non-profit organizations that serve communities of color. So I've been able to already do at least 2 advocacy trainings since the new year has come in, and teaching them how to tell their story according to our NAMI Smarts program. Yay!
Nice.
And so I think that's a huge benefit too, as well, because again, we want individuals who fall into the area of diversity and inclusion to see what other things we can be doing in this area to move the needle. And I definitely think that for communities of color, being able to have a voice and knowing how to speak up for themselves, and knowing how to share about what their mental health challenges may be, what their substance use challenges may be with their loved ones, with themselves, within their profession. I think all of that is critical too as it relates to this DEI movement. The other piece that we're finding and that we're really working on, NAMI Georgia leadership, is looking at the criminal justice system. Criminal justice system right now is our largest mental health provider across the state of Georgia and even across our nation in many of our states. And so that's something we're taking more of a closer look at as it relates to decriminalizing the mental illness piece. And so we're also looking at how DEI is a part of that as well. So just to give a few stats, 1 in 3 African-American men will serve a lifetime prison sentence. 40.2% of African-American men make up our United States prison system. NAMI just came out with recent statistics stating that African Americans and African American males will usually spend longer time in jail. So they have longer sentencing times, like I just said about that statistic. And also they experience injuries more often in our criminal justice system. And they also experience solitary confinement more often and are wrongly accused. So again, those are areas still that we are taking a closer look at, seeing how we can again provide the knowledge, provide the information, and provide the advocacy around that so that we can decrease the disproportionate numbers of African-American men within our criminal justice system. One of the key programs I think that has been a great help, in doing that is the National Stepping Up Initiative. I would like to see every county have a national stepping up initiative. And what that national initiative focuses on is reducing the number of individuals with mental illness and substance use in the jails. So again, moving forward, I think, Peg, in paths like this, bringing the knowledge, bringing the awareness through doing community forums, panel discussions like we've been doing, like this interview we're doing tonight, and then the advocacy piece, and yes, learning more about the National Stepping Up Initiative and how we can bring it to our counties within our local community. That's a step forward.
Mhm. Those statistics are staggering. That life sentence number in particular is just amazing. And another statistic that came up in a recent episode was that of Black men who are not able to get a high school diploma, 7 out of 10 of them will end up incarcerated at some point. And how can that not be a system issue when that number is so ridiculously high? So yeah, so much work to do, my goodness. Shifting, right, goodness, it's heartbreaking.
It is, and it's a passion of mine. And so I can't believe I almost didn't share this, but we did our first ever African-American male mental health symposium through our DEI committee under NAMI Georgia. And so of course I led that and hosted that as well. It went absolutely wonderful, Peg. We did it virtual, but we did it virtual live stream. So we were actually able to have our speakers live, as well as I was live and present there with them, and then our audience was virtual. And so I think we probably had about 200 to attend live. And since then, it's been shared as a resource now. I think we're up to about 600 views thus far. And so that's something that I'll share with you all as well too, so that you can share it with the individuals who are on tonight as well. But again, in my planning and leading that symposium, I brought in all African-American male speakers who are within different helping professionals. I had a naturopathic doctor. I had several licensed professional counselors. One of the counselors I believe is on the call tonight, Dr. Maurice Cassell. I have to give him a great shout out. He serves NAMI Georgia so well too in our community. And then we had our keynote, and our keynote was the sheriff of Fulton County, Georgia. And Fulton County, Georgia is the largest county in the state of Georgia. So we were very grateful and very thankful to have Sheriff Pat Labatt to come in and be our keynote and speak about what Atlanta is experiencing as it relates to their jails and the DEI issue, as well as mental illness within their jails. So again, doing symposiums like that too can address some of the DEI concerns that we're having, especially around our African American men and around the criminal justice system being the #1 mental health provider.
Mhm. Wow, there's so much we can learn from you, Dr. Izzy, and I'm so glad we're partnering in this way and opening the door to further partnerships. So shifting gears a little bit, you have experience as a clinician, as a loved one, as a NAMI leader. Based on those different roles, what are your thoughts about faith, hope, and recovery?
Oh, absolutely. And that's something I think we really hold to, Peg, as it relates to moving forward and thriving. But I am a woman of great faith, and my faith is of the Christian faith. So I follow and lead from the instructions that I do receive from the Almighty God. That is definitely an aspect that I follow very, very closely. And I've been blessed again to have beautiful grandmothers. They're my late grandmothers now because they've transitioned on, but they instill faith in me. And so that's something I'm really, really grateful for. So in my practice, I do make sure to include faith in my therapy and in my treatment for my clients that have a strong Christian faith-based background. So that is something that, again, I hold significant. I know that it is very important, like I said, integrating into therapy and treatment, especially when it comes to the African American community, because many individuals within the African American community hold very tightly and very closely to their faith. So again, that's a part of that multicultural competence piece and the cultural humility piece that we have to be aware of and understand, because many times that can make all the difference in assisting that African American client that has a mental health challenge with being able to recover and thrive. So absolutely, faith is key. Hope. And I believe that hope comes as a result of when we are able to see individuals thrive that have mental health conditions and that are walking in recovery. That's where that hope piece really comes from. That's why I think I fell so in love with NAMI's approach, because of the lived experience and also because of the family approach and including the family in. And let me give a quick shout out to NAMI Guilford, because while I was at home in North Carolina visiting my beautiful mother and father and all of my great loved ones there, I came across a close family member that was really having some struggles and some challenges with their child that has a mental health challenge. And because I had already been in contact with Peg and NAMI North Carolina was already on my mind, I said, let me connect you with NAMI Guilford. Please reach out to them and get on board. And she said NAMI Guilford was prompt. They were prompt in getting her involved in the support group, as well as signing her up for the family to family classes. So again, it takes all of us. It literally takes all of us. It takes a village for us to be able to provide that hope. I could tell a major difference after she had went through one of the groups. She texted me immediately and thanked me so much. And I just told her, welcome to the NAMI family. We are happy to have you. So it's things like that that I feel that fosters that hope. Okay, that really fosters that hope in us and the recovery aspect. I just love recovery as a whole in general. Like I said, all recovery to me is about the individual being able to thrive, moving through whatever mental health and substance use challenges they have. But again, because I started out as an addiction counselor, I love the 12 steps as well. I understand that individuals can live by those steps and really live a life of recovery and thrive. My dissertation, I literally did on Narcotics Anonymous. So it was titled The Influence of Narcotics Anonymous on Long-Term Sobriety, Family Relationships, and Career Development. And so my results from that study was truly that individuals do thrive in recovery because they were getting support, they were attending support groups, they had a sponsor, they were following the 12 steps. And so all of them have been in long-term recovery for literally more than 20 years. So again, it works if we work it.
Works if we work it. That's recovery. All right. Well, I think at this point, we're going to pivot towards the interview and wrap up the interview portion of the show and move into our video of the week. First, I want to take a quick moment to give a shout out to our helpers behind the scenes, Executive Director Gary Kreitz on Chatbox and Psychiatric Nurse Gail Pruitt on Facebook. Thank you both so much for always being there. And of course, thank you so much to Dr. Izzy for sharing your time and your expertise with us and your inspiration. Now we have a video of the week, and Dr. Izzy mentioned the event that she was at, organized by Silence the Shame, NAMI, and Clark Atlanta University. There was a moment, Dr. Izzy, where you spoke on the topic of purpose, and I just love that moment. So I've got that quote, I've got that queued up for us. Here is Dr. Izzy in action. It's a wonderful quote. And the background, surprise, yeah. The background is they were talking about social media and how people can feel less than. You see everyone bragging about what they're doing, who they are, what they have. So let's check this out.
Well, yeah, everybody wants nice things. Everybody wants to be successful, but like, at what expense, right? Not for your mental health and wellness. It's just not worth it.
Absolutely. And whatever happened to purpose? You know, that's why we're here today.
Yeah.
Because we're sharing our gifts, we're sharing our purpose. We want to make sure that we're aspiring to be individuals that can impact the world. You're so blessed to have the opportunity to be at a great institution, getting a great education, so that once you graduate from CAU and you have that pride, as we all have, but that's why I love what A&T has done too. Now we speak about Aggies Do. Because it's about what are we doing and going out here to impact the world, to put our hands on people. That's what we should be inspiring to be and do. And once you keep your mind focused on that, then you will see those levels of success start to happen in your life. You will see the wealth start to come in your life. So again, those illusions that we see on social media, those are not the illusions that we should be aspiring to have. It's the impact, it's the purpose, it's fulfilling the destiny and why we're here on this earth.
You follow your,
I just love that. Oh my goodness. So that was Trudy right in the middle. Y'all could see Trudy from that.
Rudy from the Cosby Show.
Yes, that was on the tip of my tongue.
That's all right. That is okay. That is okay.
All right.
But thank you so much, babe. That was beautiful. Thank you for sharing.
It truly was. It was very inspiring. And we've got some questions lined up here for you.
Okay.
What advice? Yeah, right in the Q&A, quite a few lined up. What advice do you have for people who cannot afford counseling but desperately need it?
Absolutely. Well, again, there are resources that are out there. So definitely getting connected with a great organization like NAMI, the National Alliance on Mental Illness, can be a benefit to you because they're connected to other organizations and other resources as well to ensure that you get the information that you need to find out about low-cost therapy and even possibly free therapy. There are some professionals that will offer therapy pro bono. Okay. And so it's important, again, that we get connected. Make sure that we are suited up as it relates to our support system. So making sure that you are at least attending support groups, mental health-based support groups, that can be a great start for you until you are able to get therapy. But yes, there are resources out there for low-cost therapy, and some professionals do provide pro bono therapy.
Great answer. And of course, support groups are not any substitute for clinical care, but it can be remarkably helpful to talk to people who have been there. And your NAMI support groups are always available and free. Okay, from Facebook, Heather, how much does the low reimbursement rate of Medicaid impact access to mental health services in our communities? So many clinicians leave public mental health because of this.
That is indeed true. That is something, again, that is a work in progress and that we're having to work on more so at the advocacy and policy-based level. Some of those things do take time, but again, understanding that Mental health professionals, individuals who work in all different sectors of healthcare. We have certain management care challenges that we usually have to face in that, even in private practice, when it comes to certain billing. Even still, licensed professional counselors are unable to bill for Medicare. And so again, these are things that we're still working on as it relates to policy changes and making sure that we're getting out and doing the advocacy training and making things aware so that our policymakers know this and they know that it's a strain on our mental health care system as well as on keeping our professionals in the field. So again, my encouragement is get involved in the advocacy piece that NAMI does so well and making sure that your voice is heard as it relates to some of these challenges. And that's exactly what I'm doing as well. We've been in the fight a long time as it relates to LPCs billing for Medicare, and we know that that is a hindrance to many of our elderly population because many of them are in rural areas. And so they still don't have that access to all of the opportunities that they could have when it comes to getting therapy, because again, LPCs cannot provide that. But we stay in the game, meaning we continue to press forward, we keep advocating, and we trust and believe that change will happen. I think we're in a great place this year, especially with NAMI Georgia, with where we are. We have declared the year of 2022 the year of mental health policy reform. So there are things that we can do to ensure still that our voice is being heard, so that hopefully in the very near future, those things will change.
Okay, another question from Heather on Facebook. Even extending past mental health, how do we encourage communities to reach out for help? What's the best way to do that?
Encouraging communities as a whole to reach out for help. I think it still kind of goes back to some of the things we shared before in the interview, making sure that that mental health awareness piece again is there. I think treading softly when we're going into some of these communities and we're providing trainings, we're providing events, even rallies and different things like that. I think all of that makes a difference as it relates to getting them to a place to where they will reach out for the help. But like I said, having more mental health awareness events and mental health trainings within these different communities, especially communities of color, I think that gets them to a place of comfort of where they can then voice, what their opinions are and what they feel. Because again, like we talked about before earlier, you have certain communities who have been mistreated by systems, okay, systems of care, okay, institutional racism, systemic racism for one. Those are areas that again can take time for people to develop the level of trust as it relates to speaking up and getting the assistance and the services that they need. And then still too, just like we just talked about, there's still system challenges, okay, that have to be changed at the policy level, okay, before we can still see some of these things change. But absolutely, going into these communities and treading softly and having these events and having these conversations, I think can bring a comfort level.
Mhm. Yeah, I think you make a good point about these events keeping the information visible, even if you don't reach everyone, or in terms of attendance, and you did reach a lot of people, but you reach so many people who are just, it's on their radar, and that makes a difference. It plants a seed, I think, in terms of awareness and seeing it as important.
Absolutely. I agree, Peg. And like you said, making sure that the conversations keep going. I think that's most important, continuing to have the conversations, because again, if we still have the challenges, we need to keep having the conversations because the change hasn't happened yet.
Yeah, well, I have a feeling we'll get to keep talking for quite a while.
Indeed, indeed.
So another question from Facebook, and this is a follow-up to the question about low reimbursement rates for Medicaid. How does that impact the substance use community?
Absolutely. Well, I think it's kind of on both ends, pretty much a little similar when it comes to mental health and when it comes to substance use treatment. Because as we talked about before, we're seeing now as it relates to mental health changes over time that most individuals that have a substance use challenge, many of them also have a mental health related challenge connected with that, which is something, of course, that in the clinical field we refer to as co-occurring disorders. So again, when it comes to that reimbursement and getting the treatment that they need, more than likely they're going to be looking at both of those helping professionals, those clinics, those hospitals. They're going to be looking at both of those. And the professionals, when they assess them, they're going to be looking for whatever that mental health challenge is that may be an underlying issue or a trauma that's the underlying issue as to why that individual has turned to the substance use and been active in substance use for quite some time. So again, it may very well look the same as it relates to the reimbursement piece. And again, that's going to go back again to advocacy. And that's something that we do really well too in Georgia. We've collaborated with several of the primary substance use recovery organizations, and we have them on board as well. So we're advocating together. And so we're all going to the Georgia State Capitol, and we are having press conferences and talking about these challenges as a whole. So again, coming together and making our voices heard. And yes, we have our legislators, they're on board too. So they're right there as well. So they're hearing about both sides, and they're also hearing about how they're affected one another and how they're affected together.
Right. Very inspiring. Thank you, Heather, on Facebook for those questions. This next one is from Gary. Could you talk a bit about how our religious traditions can both reinforce negative stigmas and reinforce positive recovery?
Indeed, indeed. Thanks, Gary, for that question. And many times when I speak to people about faith as it relates to understanding more about mental health challenges, mental health conditions, I do ask them to do thorough research too as it relates to when it comes to what an actual mental illness is, what mental health is, and then also understanding first person language that we're working toward using, such as mental health conditions, mental health challenges, and all of that. So it's important that you get a little background knowledge on all of it. But the key thing is understanding that whenever we have a faith difference as it relates to what mental health actually is or what mental illness actually is, then we want to make sure that we're looking at how is this affecting this individual. Okay, how long has this individual been experiencing what they've been experiencing? Have they been able to get the help that they need just from faith? Or have they been able to get the help that they need from faith and from a clinical professional? And so many times I've heard things like said in the Black church, well, just pray about it, just pray about it. And absolutely we want to pray about it. We as believers, of the Christian faith within the Black church setting, we know that prayer does work. But we also have to realize that when a person is really struggling and having difficulty mentally and emotionally, God has too gifted individuals such as myself to be able to assist them with coping tools and coping mechanisms to help to structure them in such a way that they can walk down a path of healing by being able to pray and being able to use these interventions and these tools as well. And so that's just an example of how sometimes we can have a negative sometimes outlook on possibly what our faith is telling us versus what we see out here in society as a whole, but it's something for us to take a closer look at. And I realize sometimes everybody is not quite ready to get there yet, but sometimes it may take them just a little time. But the other piece of the question that Gary asked about is the positive aspect of it. Again, when we integrate our faith's principles, okay? So I've taught my clients how to pray, and pray for certain things as it relates to their mental health challenge. I've taught them how to create affirmations and include scripture in their affirmations. I've taught them how to do prayer walks, and again, talking to God, but not just talking to God, but also talking to God about things that they want to see different in their life and how they want to change and how different things are affecting them. And so that's a form of release. I've talked to my clients about developing journals, prayer journals. Journal is another clinical tool. So again, when we're able to integrate faith with these interventions and these clinical tools, we will see many of our individuals thrive and really start on that healing path that they really want to get to. So thanks again, Gary, for that question. But we do know that faith integration can be a huge benefit to treatment and to healing.
Well, that question, your answer really resonates with me, and just hearing you talk about that lifted me up. And as someone who's done many support groups and spoken with people from all different walks of life and different faiths, I always want to acknowledge that NAMI celebrates whatever your belief system is that lifts you up. So we support any and all faith or belief system that works for you. And I see that we have a little gap in our questions in the Q&A. Please feel free to keep them coming. In the meantime, I'll make some quick announcements. When you leave the Zoom meeting, if you're with us on Zoom, a survey will magically appear, a Survey Monkey with just a few quick questions about tonight's program. If you enjoyed it or if you'd like to help us improve, please fill that out. Fill it out either way. It will help us so much to improve over time and to keep our grant funding coming. Also, join us next week. Thursdays with NAMI will feature Nancy Johns, a veteran who went into becoming an ambulance paramedic after serving as an Army medic. An ambulance accident led her to a traumatic brain injury. After that, she developed hallucinations and had an incredible journey, ended up spending 17 years in long-term care, a psychiatric facility that's local to Raleigh called Dorothea Dix Hospital. How did she navigate her way back to sanity and get her life back? You'll have to tune in next week to find out. Nancy Johns, wonderful storyteller. And please join us. Join us next week, 7 o'clock. We'll be right here. Do you have anything else you'd like to share with us, Dr. Izzy?
Well, I just want to say thank you. I think that this was absolutely a joy, Peg. I have enjoyed all of the questions, and I just hope that those who are watching and those who will go back and look at the recording, that they will learn a great deal and that it will be impactful to them as well as influential. And so again, thank you all. And just remember that when it comes to mental health, we strive every day, all of us, to have great mental health by applying tools and skills. And so again, I don't think that mental health doesn't touch anyone. It touches all of us at some aspect and point of our life. And it's absolutely, again, nothing to be ashamed of. And when it comes to receiving therapy and counseling, again, that's another tool. It's another tool in your toolbox. It may be what some call a paid friend, but it's a paid friend that's there to help and to guide you on that healing process. So again, I hope that some of the things that I shared with you all tonight will be a great benefit to you. And thanks again.
All right. Well, thank you so much for spending your time and inspiration with us and helping fill our collective cup this evening. As you go forward in the week ahead, everyone, please be well, take care of yourselves, take care of each other, and have a wonderful week. All righty. Good night. Bye-bye.